Hey guys, Silverpaw Reads here. This is chapter 17 of those three words, so let's get started. It was strange waking up to the jagged edge of shape of leaves against the morning sky. For the most peculiar moment, Tails was certain he was 7 years old again, running through the emerald trees at the end of summer. He could remember the games he played with Sonic. Games without rules in which the objective was to be basically have as much fun as possible, make as much noise as possible. They'd always end up collapsing to the ground, usually giggling, and then they'd stare up at the trees and it was time to go home. Tails sat up and observed the clearing they had spent the night in. It was really small, only just enough room for the two of them to fit comfortably, but that was very well concealed. The bag which Sonic had brought with him had been slung into a nearby bush, as there was nowhere else for it to go. Tails leaned over and pulled it out, examining the contents. His shoulders sagged with disappointment when he saw what was inside. Okay, so we knew Sonic had packed it in a hurry, and his mind had been on other things, but he had hoped for something halfway useful. Food, drinks, maybe spare clothes or something to keep warm. What he did find was school books, 2 shirts, and a handful of candy bars. At least there's food, he thought. Though the fact it wasn't very comforting. They couldn't stay here for too long. Tails packed everything back into the bag and pushed it through the bush. He turned to face Sonic and was surprised to see that he was awake, sitting up and staring upwards. He turned his head and smiled softly at his companion. Tails managed to smile back without forcing it and shuffled closer to the hedgehog. The leaves rustled above them as they sat together, Sonic's arms draped over Tails' shoulder. They directed their eyes at nothing particular. The quiet was unsettling. Somehow they got the feeling that there was someone close by, waiting for them to give away their location. Sonic was the first of them to speak, and the sudden sound of voice startled Tails. Sonic began, lowering his voice to realize how loud it sounded. Thinking. In your sleep? Tails whispered, his voice so soft the swish of trees could drown it out. Sonic grinned. No, I've been awake for a while. It's okay to speak loudly, nobody's around, and this little space is pretty far away from the main pathway of the forest. How do you know there's no one here? Tails asked. He still felt uneasy. I got up a while ago and checked around a little. They obviously thought we'd exited the forest and gone somewhere else. You got up and left me here? Weren't you afraid of being seen? Of course I was, and I didn't go very far. I didn't want to let you out of my sight. Tails' heart thudded at the idea of Sonic leaving him alone here. He would have been so afraid if he had woken up and Sonic wasn't there. He didn't want to be separated from the hedgehog for a second. They had to stay together. The fox adjusted his position, curling his tails at random and snuggling into Sonic a little more. The hedgehog used both arms to hold him there tightly. So, what were you thinking about earlier? Tails pressed carefully after a few minutes of silence. Sonic gazed straight ahead, collecting his thoughts from earlier on, organizing them in an intelligible way. Do you ever wonder if we're the only people on this planet who are gay? Tails paused a little, stunned. Whatever he had been expecting Sonic to be musing, that wasn't it. The truth was, Tails had considered before maybe there were others like them on Mobius. Its population was so large that it was almost impossible for only a scattering of homosexuals to have existed in the past century. Sonic and Tails were now the first ever male-male couple in existence, though, of course, their outings had not been voluntary. So, what about the possibility of more gays in the world? Not only that, but perhaps even more secret gay couples. The idea was so likely that it was near impossible for there to not be any other people like them on the planet. Yeah, Tails replied, I have thought about it. I think it's pretty possible there's more like us. Exactly, Sonic agreed eagerly. And if there are more people like us around, then by now they've got to be supporting us, right? Tails' brow furrowed. I don't really know what you mean, he said, confused. Think about it, Sonic began to carefully explain. If there are more secret gay people, or even couples out there in the world, and they hear about us, and how we've been found out, and how we're on the run, they're going to want us to escape and survive, right? He knelt up and faced Tails as he continued to explain. Okay, so I guess they won't actually come out and say, we're gay too, now let them go, but they're going to be willing us to survive, so there's hope for them, and well, this might sound like a weird idea, but I was thinking that what if there were already some gays who had decided to just leave before they were caught? What if there was some kind of, I don't know, like a refuge for people like us? Maybe not a refuge as such, but a place where people go if they're actually gay and they can't live there in peace, and they can live there in peace without anyone knowing where they are. Tails tried to take in all of Sonic's ideas at once. He did have a point though. There was a chance that there was some kind of escape could have been formed somewhere where they could be safe for the rest of their lives, and if it were full of gays anyway, they could stay together because nobody would mind. You're saying we should try and search for a place like this one? Tails asked slowly, finding it hard to keep up with Sonic's thoughts. The hedgehog thought about this and shook his head sadly. I don't know how we'd find one. It's just about impossible, but here's what I think. I think that if anyone was supporting us, they'd tell us about the place we can go. They'd contact us in secret and let us know where it was. But no one knows where we are. How could anyone contact us? Sonic's shoulders sagged and he sat back against the tree. Sorry, Sonic, I didn't mean... No, you're right, it was a stupid idea. I mean, why would anyone support us? We live in a world which hates us. The idea of someone actually wanting to live with us is ridiculous. Tails reached out to comfort Sonic when a sudden furious rustling followed by a thud as a silhouette landed in front of them. Tails' hand froze in midair at the same time as a short click sounded. You're right about that, a voice agreed, its owner stepping forward swiftly. Sonic turned and tensed up as the cold metal of a gun's barrel pressed roughly between his eyes. Sonic's heart pounded. Running never tired him out, but games did. Hiding away from others and the thrill of getting caught made his pulse race much more than running a mile. He peered around the tree, no one in sight. Slowly, he sneaked around the base of the tree and shoved through the bushes, landing expertly in the dusty clearing. Trees and high leafy masses surrounded him, easily concealing him away from his friends. He relaxed and sat back against a tree, his heart calming steadily. No one will find me here, he mumbled to himself with a smile. Found you! A voice cried, and Shadow the Hedgehog tumbled from a tree in a flurry of leaves, trying and failing to land neatly. He collected himself quickly and straightened up, pointing his weapon at his rival's face. Sonic felt his chest thud rapidly again as he realized there was no way of avoiding Shadow's intimidating artillery. The blue hedgehog uttered a childish profanity before Shadow pulled the trigger. An amused and somewhat menacing laugh escaped his lips as he did so. Before the ammunition could hit his best friend, a small fox jumped between the hedgehogs and took the full force of Shadow's large gun. Tails was knocked to the ground from the force of the water, while his protection meant that Sonic received only a minimal sprinkling. Shadow grunted in annoyance, staring down at the drenched and dazed fox on the ground. Tails sat up, his fur heavy and dripping from Shadow's powerful water gun. The dark hedgehog lowered it to his side. It was empty and Sonic still irritatingly dry. Shadow knew how much his rival hated water, and he was looking forward to drenching him in his worst fear. Stupid Tails, you're gonna ruin all our games! Shadow yelled. The fox looked up at the 9-year-old. The face which glared back down emitted hatred and annoyance, the deep crimson eyes staring into the younger's blue ones as if suggesting threat. Tails should have been scared and usually would have been, but at one glance at Sonic's grateful grin reassured Tails that making Shadow a little bit aggravated was worth it. Still soaked and beginning to shiver, Tails turned to his black and red friend and stuck out his tongue as a successful taunt.